Min-soo, the Iron Dragon, was dying in a Seoul alley that smelled of trash and rain, his expensive suit soaked through with blood and filth. The knife wound in his stomach was deep enough that he could feel his pulse weakening with each breath. 30 years of ruling Korea's underworld, and this was how it ended: betrayed, bleeding out in the mud like a common thug. Then the rain stopped, but only over him. Min-soo looked up through pain-blurred vision and saw a black umbrella. Beneath it stood a small girl, maybe 7, with dark eyes that studied his tattoos and the blood pooling around him with the calm curiosity most children reserved for stray cats. "You're getting wet," she said simply, adjusting the umbrella to better cover his wounds. Not running, not screaming, not showing the fear that had been the only currency Min-soo understood for 3 decades. The Iron Dragon, the man who could level buildings with a phone call, who made grown men weep with a look, was being held captive by a child's incomprehensible mercy. And for the first time in 30 years, Min-soo didn't know what to do. Seoul's Gangnam district existed in carefully maintained fear. Everyone knew the rules. You didn't make eye contact with certain men in certain cars. You didn't ask questions about the upscale restaurants that never seemed to close. And you absolutely, under no circumstances, approached the Iron Dragon. Min-soo had built his empire on that fear. For 30 years he'd been the nightmare that kept rival syndicates awake, the name that made politicians nervous, the force that turned Korea's criminal underworld into his personal chessboard. He didn't have friends, didn't have family, didn't have anyone who looked at him and saw anything other than a beautifully dressed monster. Until tonight, when his own lieutenants had decided the monster had gotten too old, too comfortable, too predictable. The ambush had been efficient: 12 men, 3 minutes. His security team bought off or already dead. Min-soo had fought his way out, but the knife wound in his stomach was mortal. He'd made it to this alley knowing it would be his grave. Then a child violated every rule his world was built on. Jessie McClevin, he wouldn't learn her name until later, stood over him with a cheap black umbrella, her sneakers soaked through, her expression showing no fear of the blood or the tattoos or the very obvious danger of being near a dying crime boss. "Should I call someone?" she asked, her voice carrying the practiced calm of a child who'd seen adults in crisis before. Min-soo tried to speak, to tell her to run, to save herself from whatever consequences helping him would bring. But his voice wouldn't work, his vision was darkening, and all he could do was stare at this impossible girl who was choosing mercy over survival. In Min-soo's world, kindness was a death sentence. Compassion was weakness. Fear was the only thing that kept you alive. This 7-year-old girl was broke. She had no fear to give him, no understanding of the danger she just walked into, no comprehension that shielding a monster from the rain would change both their lives forever. The last thing Min-soo saw before consciousness left him was yellow fabric and dark eyes that looked at him like he was human. Not the Iron Dragon. Not a crime lord. Not a killer. Just a man who needed help. And that impossible kindness, that refusal to see him as the monster he'd spent 30 years becoming, would transform everything. Because the most feared man in Korea was about to discover that being saved by a child meant owing a debt he couldn't repay with money or violence. Only with something far more terrifying: becoming the father she'd never had. Before we dive in, understand this. What you're about to hear isn't just a tale of the underworld. It's a collision between absolute power and accidental mercy. A man who built an empire on the currency of fear. A small girl who saw a human being where everyone else saw a beautifully dressed monster. And a legendary figure who's about to learn that a debt of kindness, once owed to a child, doesn't just change your life. It detonates your entire world. Now, if you've been watching stories like this and haven't subscribed yet, trust me, no pressure. But if, by the end of this story, your chest feels tight, if you catch yourself holding your breath, if one moment stays with you longer than it should, then tap that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Because stories like this, they don't just entertain, they linger. Alright, Let me show you how a dying monster was saved by the simplest act of grace. The betrayal began at 9:47 p.m. in Min-soo's own headquarters, a glass tower in Gangnam that housed legitimate business on 20 floors and his real empire in the basement levels. His second-in-command, Park Jin-woo, had called an emergency meeting. Security breach in the Busan operation, he'd said, his voice carrying just the right amount of concern. Min-soo had walked into the conference room and immediately knew. Too many lieutenants present. Too few bodyguards. The slight smell of gun oil that shouldn't have been there. Park's apologetic smile confirmed it. I'm sorry, Hyung-nam, but you've gotten old. Sentimental. The organization needs younger blood. The first bullet shattered the window behind Min-soo's chair. A sniper he'd trained personally. He'd moved before conscious thought, flipping the conference table, drawing the pistol he always carried. But there were 12 of them. All his. All bought. The fight was brutal and efficient. Min-soo had built his reputation on being unkillable, and for 6 minutes, he proved it. 3 men went down. 4 more were wounded. But numbers won. A knife, his own blade, the one he'd carried for 30 years, caught him in the stomach. Deep. Mortal. He'd fought his way to the emergency exit, leaving blood on floors he'd walked for decades. Behind him, his empire was already being divided. His accounts frozen. His safe houses compromised. His loyalists being systematically eliminated. 30 years of building power, gone in an hour of fire and steel. Min-soo stumbled into the alley behind the building, his vision blurring, rain mixing with blood. He'd thought about calling for help, but everyone he trusted was either dead or had just tried to kill him. The Iron Dragon was falling. No allies. No backup. No mercy coming. Just rain, pain, and the certain knowledge that he'd die alone. Then a black umbrella appeared, held by small hands that didn't shake, and everything he thought he knew about his world shattered. Jessie McClevin had been taking a shortcut home from the convenience store when she'd heard the sounds, breaking glass, shouting, something that might have been gunfire but could have been firecrackers. She'd learned early to walk away from those sounds. Keep your head down. Mind your business. Survive. But then she'd seen the man collapse in the alley, and her feet had stopped moving. He looked scary. Tattoos covering his arms, blood everywhere. A knife still clutched in one hand like he might use it. Most people would have run. Jessie just opened her umbrella. You're getting wet, she said, adjusting it to cover him better. The man stared at her with eyes that looked confused and dangerous in equal measure. His mouth moved but no sound came out. I called 911, she continued calmly, pulling out a flip phone that looked ancient. They said 10 minutes. Maybe less. She'd actually called from the store before approaching him, because helping people was good but being smart about it was better. The rain drummed against cheap fabric. The man's breathing was wet and labored. Jessie stood perfectly still, holding the umbrella steady. My name's Jessie, she offered when the silence stretched too long. What's yours? He didn't answer, just kept staring at her like she was something impossible. She was used to that look. Foster care kids got it a lot. Adults trying to figure out why you weren't crying, weren't begging, weren't showing the emotions they expected. You don't have to talk, she said. I'll just wait with you. And she did. For 10 minutes in the rain, a 7-year-old girl stood guard over the Iron Dragon, her umbrella a bright spot of defiance against Seoul's dark sky. When the ambulance arrived, called anonymously, no questions asked in a neighborhood that knew better, Jessie stepped back. You'll be okay now, she said simply. Min-soo tried to reach for her, to ask her name, to understand why she'd stayed. But the paramedics were already loading him, and Jessie was already walking away, her black umbrella bobbing through the rain like nothing unusual had happened. She'd saved the most dangerous man in Korea, and she didn't even know it. Min-soo woke in darkness that smelled of antiseptic and old secrets. The clinic, if you could call it that, occupied the basement of a building that officially didn't exist. Dr. Choi ran it for people who couldn't go to hospitals, who needed discretion more than they needed proper licensing. You died twice on the table, Dr. Choi said, appearing from shadows. I'm surprised you're awake already. Most people would be unconscious for days. Min-soo's throat was too dry to speak. His stomach felt like someone had packed it with broken glass. Your organization thinks you're dead, Dr. Choi continued, adjusting in 4 drip. Park Jin-woo held a very respectful memorial service yesterday. Lovely flowers. Yesterday, Min-soo had been unconscious for over 24 hours. My first order, his voice came out as a rasp, is not revenge. Dr. Choi's eyebrows rose. In 30 years of treating the Iron Dragon's wounds, he'd never heard that sentence. Find a girl, Min-soo continued. 7, maybe 8 years old. Black umbrella. She was in the alley behind my building 3 nights ago. Sir, your empire has been. I don't care about the empire right now. Min-soo tried to sit up, pain lancing through him. I care about finding the child who saved my life. Dr. Choi absorbed this, recalculating everything he thought he knew about his most dangerous patient. You want me to locate a random street child? In Seoul? That could take. Then start now. Min-soo's voice carried the particular coldness that made Dr. Choi remember exactly who he was treating. Use whatever resources you need. I want her name, her address, her situation. Everything. And then I pay my debt. Min-soo closed his eyes, exhausted. Because 30 years in this business taught me that debts always come due. And I owe that girl more than I can repay with money. Dr. Choi left quietly, already making calls. In the darkness, Min-soo touched the wound in his stomach. The wound that should have killed him would have killed him, if not for a child who'd chosen mercy over sense. Park Jin-woo and the traitors could wait. First, he needed to find the girl with the black umbrella. Because the Iron Dragon had just discovered something more important than revenge. He discovered he wanted to be worthy of being saved. Dr. Choi returned 3 days later with a folder that felt too thin for the weight it carried. Jesse McClevin, he said, opening to a photo, school ID from 2 years ago showing a small girl with dark eyes and no smile. Age 7. American father, Korean mother. Both deceased. Car accident when she was 4. Min-soo studied the photo, memorizing features he'd only glimpsed through pain and rain. She's been in the foster system since. Currently placed with a woman named Mrs. Han in Yeongdongpo. Dr. Choi's tone suggested that placement was questionable. The file shows 6 previous placements. She keeps getting moved for being too quiet or emotionally distant. Meaning she doesn't cry or beg or show the trauma responses adults expect from orphans. So they think something's wrong with her and send her back. Min-soo felt something cold settle in his chest. He knew that neighborhood, Yeongdongpo. He'd terrorized it for years, collecting protection money from shopkeepers who could barely afford it. Mrs. Han runs a borderline illegal fostering operation. Takes in kids for the government stipend, provides minimal care. Jesse shares a room with 4 other children. The building has code violations dating back 5 years. Dr. Choi pulled out more documents. There's also this. Jesse's been accosted twice by debt collectors in the past month. Mrs. Han apparently owes money to some very unpleasant people. Which people? Low-level enforcers. They work for the Hwang crew. Min-soo knew the Hwang crew. Bottom feeders who preyed on the weakest targets. The kind of thugs he'd once used for dirty work before deciding they were too stupid to trust. The girl who saved me, he said quietly, is living in a place I used to extort money from, being harassed by thugs who used to work for me. Karma has a sense of irony, or a sense of justice. Min-soo closed the folder. Get me clothes. I'm going to see her. You can barely walk. Then get me a cane. I'm going to see the child. And I'm going to make sure those debt collectors understand they just made a fatal mistake. Dr. Choi looked at the man who'd built an empire on fear, and saw something new in his eyes. Not rage. Not calculation. Something that looked almost like protective fury. The Iron Dragon was about to learn what it meant to care about someone other than himself. And Seoul's underworld was about to learn what happened when you threatened his savior. Min-soo arrived at the Yongdongpo apartment building at dusk, leaning heavily on a cane, his wound still pulling with each step. The building was worse than the file suggested. Crumbling concrete, broken windows, the smell of mold and desperation. This was the kind of place he'd once squeezed for protection money without thinking about who actually lived there. He was halfway up the stairs when he heard it. Mrs. Han owes us 300,000 won. We don't care if she's not home. You live here, you pay. Min-soo moved faster despite the pain, rounding the corner to see two men. Mid-20s cheap suits, the cocky posture of thugs who'd never faced real consequences, blocking a doorway. And there, small and perfectly calm, stood Jessie. I'm 7, she said matter-of-factly. I don't have 300,000 won. Then maybe we take something else as payment. One of them reached for her arm. Min-soo's cane cracked across the man's wrist before conscious thought. Both thugs whirled, hands going for weapons, then froze when they saw his face. Iron Dragon, but you're dead. Clearly not. Min-soo's voice was quiet, deadly. Step away from the child. They stepped away. For the first time in 30 years, Min-soo felt anger that wasn't about business or territory or respect. This was something purer. More dangerous. These men had threatened a 7-year-old girl who'd saved his life. You work for the Huang crew, he continued, his tone conversational. Tell your boss the McClevin girl is under my protection now. Anyone who touches her answers to me personally. Sir, we didn't know. You know now. He leaned closer despite the pain it caused. And you're going to do something for me. You're going to become this girl's shadow security. You're going to make sure no one bothers her. No one threatens her. No one makes her feel unsafe. Understood. Terrified nods. If I hear she's been harassed again, I'll assume you failed. And failure is terminal. Now leave. They fled. Min-soo turned to Jessie, who was watching him with those same calm, unreadable eyes. You're the umbrella man, she said. You look better than last time. Thanks to you. He knelt carefully to her eye level, ignoring his screaming wound. Jessie McClevin. I owe you a debt. You don't owe me anything. You were hurt. I helped. That's just being a person. Just being a person. As if it were that simple. Nevertheless, Min-soo said quietly, I'm here now. And those men won't bother you again. Okay. She tilted her head. Are you going to stand there all night? Mrs. Han doesn't like visitors. Then I won't stay long. He pulled himself upright. But I will be back. To make sure you're safe. Why? Because you saved me. Because you didn't run. Because you're living in hell and still chose kindness. Because that's what people do, he said instead, using her own logic. Jessie almost smiled. Almost. As Min-soo left, he realized something terrifying. Revenge against Park Jin-woo suddenly mattered less than ensuring this child never had to shield anyone else from the rain. The Iron Dragon had found something worth protecting, and he had absolutely no idea how to do it without violence. Min-soo found the Huang crew's headquarters in a dingy office above a karaoke bar in Yongdongpo, the same neighborhood he'd once controlled completely. The two thugs from Jessie's building were there, along with their boss, Hwang Tae-sung, a bottom feeder who'd grown bold in Min-soo's absence. Iron Dragon. Hwang didn't stand playing at confidence. Heard you were dead. Heard wrong. Min-soo moved into the room with measured steps, his cane clicking on cheap linoleum. We need to discuss the McClevin girl. The foster kid? She's just leverage for. Min-soo's cane swept Hwang's desk, sending papers and money flying. The violence was sudden enough to make everyone reach for weapons. Don't, Min-soo said quietly. I'm here to make a business proposition, not start a war. But test me and I'll finish what my traitors couldn't. Hwang's hand froze on his gun. The girl is under my protection. Permanently. Anyone who touches her, threatens her, or makes her uncomfortable answers to me. Min-soo gestured to the two thugs. These two will be her shadow security. They'll watch her building, her school, anywhere she goes. Discreetly. We're debt collectors, not babysitters. You're whatever I tell you to be. Or your body's in the Han River. Choose. The room went very quiet. Additionally, Min-soo continued, Mrs. Han's debt is forgiven. Completely. You'll stop harassing everyone in that building. Consider it a community service initiative. And if we refuse? Min-soo smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Then I come back. And I bring the friends who helped me survive 30 years in this business. The ones who are very disappointed I disappeared. They're eager for something to do. He leaned forward despite the pain. I don't want to kill you, Hwang. I want you to keep that girl safe. Because she did something no one in this city has done in 3 decades. She showed me mercy when she had every reason not to. And I will burn this entire neighborhood down before I let anyone hurt her. The threat hung in the air, absolute and terrifying. Understood, Hwang whispered. Good. Min-soo straightened. Your men report to me weekly. I want updates on her safety, her well-being, anything unusual. They become her invisible guardians. And if she even suspects she's being followed, you've failed. He turned toward the exit, then paused. Oh, and Hwang? Start treating the other foster kids in Mrs. Han's building better too. Consider it practice for when you have actual honor. Min-soo left them staring, understanding finally dawning. The Iron Dragon hadn't come for revenge. He'd come to protect a 7-year-old who'd given him an umbrella. And that somehow made him more terrifying than he'd ever been. Min-soo waited outside Jesse's school on a Tuesday afternoon, leaning against a car that cost more than the building, and watched children pour out like water from a broken dam. Jesse emerged alone, as always, walking with the careful deliberation of someone used to being invisible. She stopped when she saw him. Umbrella Man. My name is Min-soo, he said. And I'd like to take you to dinner. If that's acceptable. Why? Because I still owe you a debt. She considered this with the seriousness of a judge weighing evidence. Mrs. Han says not to go with strangers. Mrs. Han also owes money to dangerous people. I'm not sure her advice is reliable. He pulled out his phone, showed her Dr. Choi's contact. This is my doctor. You can call him if you feel unsafe. He'll come immediately. Jesse studied the phone, then his face. Okay, but somewhere with good food. Mrs. Han only makes ramen. The restaurant Min-soo chose was too expensive, too formal, too much for a 7-year-old. He realized this the moment the waiter handed Jesse a menu in French. She'll have the steak, Min-soo said. Medium. With vegetables. When the food arrived, Jessie stared at the large cut of meat with practical assessment. I don't know how to cut this, she said simply. Min-soo had been preparing to be intimidating, distant, to maintain the control he'd cultivated for 30 years. Instead, he found himself moving his chair closer. Like this, he demonstrated with his own steak. Small cuts. Away from yourself so you don't get hurt. Jessie copied his movements, tongue poking out in concentration. You're good at this, she observed. Do you have kids? No. Why not? Because my life is complicated, dangerous, not suitable for children. But you're here with me. That's different. How? Because you saved me. Because you weren't afraid. Because you're the first person in 30 years who looked at me and saw someone worth helping. Because I owe you a debt, he said instead. You keep saying that. Jessie took a careful bite of steak. But I just held an umbrella. That's not a debt. That's just being nice. Just being nice. As if kindness were currency everyone possessed. In my world, Minsu said quietly, kindness is rare. Valuable. When someone gives it, especially to someone like me, it creates an obligation. What kind of obligation? To be worthy of it. Jessie absorbed this, chewing thoughtfully. Are you a bad person? The question should have been easy to dismiss. Instead, it hit like a physical blow. Yes, Minsu admitted. I've done bad things. Hurt people. Built power on fear. But you stopped those men from bothering me. That's different. And you're teaching me to cut steak. That's just. And you came to dinner even though you look like your stomach still hurts. Her eyes were too knowing for 7. Bad people don't do those things. Minsu had no answer. The ice he built around himself for 3 decades was cracking, melted by a child's simple logic. Eat your vegetables, he said instead, deflecting. They're good for you. Jessie smiled. Actually smiled. And the Iron Dragon realized he was doomed. The attack came 3 days after the dinner, proving Minsu's enemies weren't as incompetent as he'd hoped. Park Jin-woo's men found him outside Dr. Choi's clinic. 6 professionals with suppressed weapons and the cold efficiency of people who'd done this before. Minsu killed 2 before his wound reopened. The pain was blinding, but 30 years of muscle memory kept him moving, dodge, strike, use their momentum against them. A bullet grazed his arm. Another shattered the car window beside him. He was winning barely when he heard it. A small voice from down the street. Mr. Minsu? Jessie. Walking home from school. Black umbrella in hand. Everything stopped. The fighters. Minsu's heart. Time itself. Park's men saw her too. Saw Minsu's face change. Understood immediately what she meant to him. One of them raised his weapon toward the girl. Minsu moved faster than his wound should have allowed, putting himself between Jessie and the gun. The shot caught him in the shoulder, through and through, painful but not fatal. Run, he told Jessie. She didn't run. Just stood there with her umbrella, watching him bleed again. Minsu fought with a fury he'd never accessed before. Not business anger. Not professional violence. This was primal absolute. These men had threatened a child. His child, he realized with shocking clarity. When it was over, 4 men were unconscious, 1 was fleeing, and Minsu was bleeding from 3 new wounds. Dr. Choi's men appeared, the ones Minsu had called before the attack started, and secured the scene. You knew they were coming, Dr. Choi observed, applying pressure to Minsu's shoulder. I've known for days. I was ready. Minsu looked at Jessie, still standing there calmly. I just didn't expect her to be here. You can't keep doing this. Every time you surface, they'll come. And eventually she'll be collateral damage. Minsu finished the thought. I know. He looked at the unconscious men, at the blood on the street, at Jessie's small face showing concern but not fear. I can't protect her while my old life exists, he said quietly. As long as Park Jin-woo thinks I'm a threat, as long as I'm the Iron Dragon, she's a target. So what do you do? Minsu's decision crystallized with absolute clarity. I burn it down. All of it. The empire, the reputation, the threats. I destroy everything I built so thoroughly that no one has reason to come after me. And then I become someone who can keep a 7-year-old safe. He pulled himself upright despite the pain. Starting now. Jessie walked closer, her umbrella opening to shield him from the light rain that had started. You're bleeding again, she observed. I know. Should I call the ambulance? No need. The doctor's right here. Minsu touched her shoulder gently. But Jessie, I need to ask you something important. Okay. Would you be willing to let me take care of you? Properly. Legally. As your guardian. She tilted her head, considering. Like a dad. The word hit him harder than any bullet. Yes. Like a dad. Okay, she said simply. But you have to promise to stop getting hurt. I promise to try. Good enough. And just like that, the Iron Dragon's revenge transformed from destroying his enemies into protecting the one person who'd shown him mercy. Park Jin-woo could wait. First, Min-soo had to learn how to be a father. Min-soo spent the next 3 weeks destroying everything he'd spent 30 years building. Started with money. He liquidated accounts, moved assets to untraceable offshore holdings, then donated massive amounts to charities under false names. The empire's financial foundation crumbled within days. Then came the territory. Min-soo called meetings with rival bosses, men who'd feared him for decades, and simply handed over control. Gambling operations to the Kims, drug routes to the Choi family, protection rackets to whoever wanted them. You're just giving it away? One boss asked, suspicious of traps. I'm retiring, Min-soo said simply. Take it or fight over it. I don't care which. They took it. Confusion was better than conflict. The hardest part was his people, the lieutenants and soldiers who'd been loyal even when Park Jin-woo staged his coup. Min-soo called them individually to a neutral location and gave them choices. I'm leaving this life, he told each one. You can join the new bosses, start legitimate businesses with the severance I'm providing, or disappear completely. What you can't do is follow me. Why? His oldest lieutenant, Kim Sung-jae, asked. We'd die for you. I know. That's why I'm releasing you. Min-soo's voice was firm. I'm not the Iron Dragon anymore. I'm just a man trying to protect someone who deserves better than this world. They left confused but compensated. Some joined new crews. Others took the money and disappeared. A few went legitimate, opening restaurants or security firms. Within 3 weeks, Hyun Min-soo's empire was dust. Park Jin-woo sent messages, confused by the systematic dismantling. What are you doing? Min-soo sent one reply. Becoming someone worthy of being saved. Leave me alone, and I'll leave you to your throne. Come after me again, and I'll show you why I built this empire in the first place. The message was received. Park had won the throne. He didn't need to risk it fighting a ghost. The final step was the hardest. Min-soo burned his reputation. He spread rumors that he'd gone soft, that he'd been broken by the betrayal, that he was a shell of his former self. Let them think him weak. Let them think him finished. As long as they never connected him to a 7-year-old girl with a black umbrella. Dr. Choi found him in the clinic one night, staring at paperwork. You've erased yourself completely. No assets. No connections. No power base. Good. You're starting from nothing. Not nothing. Min-soo held up adoption papers he'd spent 2 weeks navigating through corrupt officials and legal channels. I have her. That's everything. The Great Iron Dragon, domesticated by a child. The Great Iron Dragon saved by a child, Min-soo corrected. There's a difference. He signed the papers that would make him Jesse's legal guardian. 30 years of building an empire gone, but somehow he'd never felt richer. The adoption process should have been simple. Single male guardian with substantial financial resources, adopting an orphan stuck in an overcrowded foster home. It wasn't. The social worker, Ms. Park, looked at Min-soo's application with undisguised suspicion. Your employment history is vague. I was in import-export. Recently retired. At 45? I was very successful. Min-soo kept his voice even. My financial statements are attached. Yes, I see. Millions in assets with no clear source. She set down the paperwork. Mr. Hyun, I can't approve an adoption when I don't know how you earned your money. Does it matter? Jesse needs a home. I can provide one. It matters when you have tattoos suggesting organized crime affiliation. Min-soo had known his past would be a problem. He'd prepared for it. "I'm calling in a favor," he told Dr. Choi that evening. "You said you were done with favors. This is the last one. For her." The favor came from Judge Kong, a man who owed Min-soo his career and his life. One phone call. One quiet meeting. One agreement that certain questions wouldn't be asked too loudly. But someone else noticed the adoption filing. Park Jin-woo sent a message. Adopting a child? How domestic. She must be very special. The threat was clear. Min-soo responded immediately. "She's none of your concern. Touch her and our truce ends." Messily. He meant it. Park knew he meant it. 2 tense weeks passed. Miss Park received a call from her supervisor suggesting the application be expedited. Judge Kong signed the final papers with unusual speed. Background checks that should have taken months cleared in days. Min-soo sat in family court on a Tuesday morning, wearing a suit that made him look respectable instead of dangerous. Jessie sat beside him in a dress Dr. Choi's wife had bought, her black umbrella leaning against the bench. "Do you understand what this means?" Judge Kong asked her gently. "Mr. Hyun would become your legal guardian. Your father." "I understand," Jessie said calmly. "He's been teaching me to cut steak and walk safely to school. That's what dads do. And you want this?" "Yes." "Mr. Hyun, do you understand the responsibilities of guardianship? This is permanent, legal, binding." Min-soo looked at the girl who'd saved his life with nothing but an umbrella and kindness. "I understand. And I'm ready." Judge Kong stamped the papers. "Then by the authority of this court, I grant full custody. Congratulations." Just like that, the Iron Dragon became a father. Outside the courthouse, Jessie looked up at him. "So I should call you Dad now?" The word still hit him like a physical impact. "If you want to." "Okay, Dad." She said it like she was testing the word's weight. "Can we get ice cream?" "Yes." Min-soo realized he was smiling. Actually smiling. "We can get ice cream." As they walked away, Min-soo's phone buzzed. A final message from Park Jin-woo. "Congratulations on your daughter. Let's keep it civilized. You stay out of my business, I stay out of yours." Min-soo deleted the message without responding. Park could have his throne. Min-soo had something infinitely more valuable. A 7-year-old who called him Dad and wanted ice cream. The great Iron Dragon had fallen. And somehow he'd never felt more powerful. It's raining again. Min-soo stands at the school gate, holding a black umbrella, the same one Jessie had carried that night in the alley, now carefully repaired where the spokes had bent. He'd kept it, stored it like a relic because some things matter more than money or power. 6 months since the adoption. 6 months of learning that being a father meant packing lunches and checking homework, and staying awake during parent-teacher conferences. 6 months of discovering that the most terrifying thing he'd ever done wasn't building an empire. It was braiding a 7-year-old's hair before school. The other parents give him space. They don't know who he was, but something in his posture suggests keeping distance. He's working on that. Dr. Choi says softening takes time. The bell rings. Children pour out like water from a broken dam. Then he sees her, Jessie, walking with 2 other girls now, actually smiling at something one of them said. Not alone anymore. Not invisible. She spots him and waves. Dad. The word still hits him like a bullet, but softer now. Kinder. He opens the umbrella as she approaches, rain drumming against cheap yellow fabric. You didn't have to come, she says, though her smile suggests otherwise. I know the way home. I know you do. Min-soo adjusts the umbrella to cover them both. But it's raining. And I have an umbrella. Jessie laughs. Actual genuine laughter that sounds nothing like fear or obligation. You're copying me. Learning from the best. They walk home together through Seoul rain. A former crime lord and the girl who'd saved him with nothing but mercy. Hyunmin-soo isn't the Iron Dragon anymore. He's just a man with a black umbrella, learning that kindness is stronger than fear. And he's finally and possibly becoming worthy of being saved. Sometimes the fiercest dragons are tamed not by swords, but by the quiet strength of a child who refuses to see a monster. The Iron Dragon has finally found a kingdom worth protecting, but the shadows of Seoul never truly sleep. Stay tuned for part 2, where the bond forged in an alley is put to the ultimate test when the past returns to claim what was lost. Thanks for watching, and remember to subscribe for more incredible stories that prove humanity still exists in the darkest places.